Hello there and welcome back to The Closet Historian and back to my sewing room for another project today. Today, in a change of pace, we're going to be trying to copy a more modern design. That's right, we're going to totally pull a Zara and just go ahead and try and knock off a modern designer piece. In this case, this dress from Alexander McQueen. What caught my eye particularly about this dress, which I believe is from the fall 2020 ready-to-wear in-store collection. I'm not even sure this was a runway piece. I'll have to double check. I don't think so. I think it was just part of their collection that actually went to stores, which usually is a little bit different than anything they show on the runway. But this dress has this sort of Frankenstein skirt where one side is a pencil skirt and the other side seems to be like an A-line plus, almost like a half-circle skirt with a handkerchief hem. And I just was perplexed by this sort of half-and-half skirt and wanted to know how it would go together practically because I'd never tried anything like this before, but it would be easy enough to draft. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the blue patterning table of doom and give this more modern design a try. Alright, here we are with, of course, some spare alphanumeric paper and my bodice block pattern. We're going to start off by doing the bodice for this dress here, because it is the easier portion, I suppose, because it's very similar to just the regular bodice block. Of course, my bodice block here has 2 darts on the front here, technically 4 if you count the center front fold, and then there's 2 on each side. But the Alexander McQueen dress here seems to have only 1 dart in the front. It's 1 dart from the waist up to the apex, and it's at a bit of an angle. So I had to decide, do I want to copy this design exactly, or do I want to keep both of my darts? I prefer having my dart fullness split into 2 at least, like this, just because with my full bust adjustment in my pattern and the size of my bust to my waist difference, like ratio in general, I like having my fullness split into at least 2 darts. So I'm going to keep 2 darts on the front of my dress here today, even though that isn't the exact design that McQueen used over there. But you know what? The bodice isn't the star of the show. The skirt, the weird 2 skirts skirt is the star of the show here. So it's not going to be that noticeable that I have another dart in my bodice in the end anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and keep the waist dart. I will move it over a little bit so that it is more similar to the angle that the McQueen dress has, and then I will move the side dart actually up into the shoulder just to kind of keep it smooth and flat and out of the way. But right now I'm just trying to decide on this V neckline and how low I want it. I'm having a really hard time drawing this V neckline today. I'm like, I can't decide. Here I am thinking, okay, so if this is how much it's going to be eaten away by seam allowance. Do I want it a little bit higher? Probably, because it just seemed too low. I should really just mark on my block pattern itself, like the lowest I want to go in life, and then I will know in the future whenever I'm drawing necklines like this. But eventually, of all those lines up there, I did choose one, but I just drew on a V neckline. Hopefully you'll have an easier time of it than I just did, obviously. Now here for this dart, I wanted to grab my skirt pattern and like make a mark where my sidemost dart is on my skirt, so that way on the pencil skirt side of this, I could have the dart line up with the dart on the bodice still. So I drew my line from there up to the apex, and then I'm going to draw my line from the apex out to the side dart, and then up to where I want to move that side dart into. So here we have our new dart placements, our neckline, etc. So I can go ahead and cut this out, so I can go ahead and start making these modifications for realsies. That's right, I said it. So here I am, just cutting everything out along the V neckline that I had actually chosen, finally. Like so. Get everything out of the way. So we can see what's going on. I'm going to cut up to the apex here along the side dart, original side dart leg here, and then along the new dart placement. Go ahead and close that waist dart. I think I just called it a side dart. It is a waist dart, honestly. And again, the McQueen dress just has this dart down here like this. It's at kind of an angle from the waist up to the apex. But alas, 1 dart for some of us just is not enough. So I'm going to go ahead and keep this one, but I will also keep my other one. I will fold that closed, cut off the excess, as I usually do, to get the correct shape for the dart fullness. And then I will redraw my dart point and dart legs. I like to have my dart point 1.25 inches down from my apex, so that's what I'm doing here. Again, the standard recommendation, I believe, is 5/8, but again, for my full bust adjustment / my full bust life, I like to have it 1.25 inches out. For this side dart, again, I will be closing this one, so I'm going to go ahead and slash from the dart leg to the apex again, and then slash up here from the shoulder down to the apex so that I can swing that dart closed, have a new one up here in the shoulder instead. You know, all darts can be manipulated anywhere you want them around the apex, basically. All darts swing from the apex, but you can move them anywhere. You can move them to the center, into the neckline, into the shoulder, into the armhole. You can move them anywhere you want. They just radiate from the apex. So I'm going to go ahead again, draw my new dart point, and draw the new dart legs up where my new shoulder dart will be. Alas. Slashing and spreading darts. It's, you know, I wonder how much of my channel is just moving darts around. But you can't say if you watch this channel that you don't know how to do that. That's for sure. Because I do it all the dang time, huh? Just going to go ahead and label this real fast here. My new Alexander McQueen dress front with my V neckline here. I eventually will be lining this dress as opposed to having a facing. So I'm just going to use the same exact pattern to cut out a lining. Now for the back of this, I'm just using a tracing of my bodice block back, and it looks like this tracing actually has the correct size of shoulder and everything, so the neckline will still match up. So I have a tracing ready to go. It's just an exact tracing of my back bodice block. I didn't need to make any changes on it. Again, the bodice of this is very standard, this dress. And I'm going to be using my standard long sleeve for this as well with an elbow dart. So I just pulled that pattern out of the bag of sleeve patterns I keep around. And then here is my standard skirt block, pencil skirt pattern as well. I've shown how I made this on the channel before. But this is just my standard skirt block that I'll be using for the pencil skirt side of this skirt. And then really the fun stuff begins. Oh, here's my sleeve pattern again. Again, this is just a tracing of this. Just wanted to show you that, I guess. Past me wanted to let you know. It's just a tracing of my standard sleeve, again, that I have shown here on the channel. But this side of the skirt, the A-line-ish side, I'm going to grab some more paper here because we're going to need a big piece of paper to make this pattern. So one side of this skirt here, what will end up being the left-hand side of my dress, is going to be a pencil skirt, and then the right-hand side is going to be this more flowy skirt. Now, I don't think this is a full circle skirt, which is what this pattern is here. It doesn't look like it has this much fullness to me. The McQueen dress, I don't think they're using a circle skirt on this side. So to me, it looks like, because I mean, look how big this pattern is. We're not going to put all of this on the side of this. It just looks like it's going to be too much fullness, you know? So I think instead what we're going to do is going to use my A-line skirt pattern and swing a little bit of extra into the A-line skirt pattern, because this just doesn't look like a full circle to me. Maybe it's a half circle skirt. I don't know. We're going to go ahead and do what I would like to call an A-line plus. So I'm grabbing my A-line skirt pattern. Here's the A-line back and front that I of course drafted in last week's video. And I'm going to trace the front of this, the center front line. So I'm just going to draw a line here to work from. And then I'll show you using the same method that we used last week to make the A-line skirt in the first place. I'll start using the A-line skirt here. Let me turn this so we can fit onto the screen here. Hold on, come on. Come on, turn the paper. Thank you. Yes, there we go. All right, so I'm tracing the center front and then like the first bit of the waistline up to where the first dart was. And I'm just going to add in another wedge of fullness here. So if you watched last week's video, you can kind of see I'm kind of building on top of what we did last week. I'm just, where the darts used to be that are already closed in this A-line skirt pattern, I'm using those as a jumping off point to be able to go ahead and again add more width to this skirt pattern and then trace the outside edge again. So again, I'm just tracing this outside edge of this A-line skirt pattern, but I've added width into it. So now it's about, I don't know, maybe twice as wide as it was before. So I'm just adding in more big triangles of fullness into the skirt, but the waistline itself stays the same. You can see the curve of the waist becomes like more acute. So the curve is less subtle now, but that's just because we've added those wedges of fullness into the rest of the skirt here. Now for the hem of this, instead of, you can see I've been measuring down from the waist towards the hem to try and find where that curved hem would normally be, but we don't want the curved hem. We want it actually to be a handkerchief hem. So we're going to leave this as a big block like this. So here from the center front, you know, towards the left-hand side of the screen here, you can see I just have drawn a straight line out parallel with the center front, and then down from the side seam, I just drew a straight line down perpendicular to that to interact with that down there for a like 90-degree point down at the hemline, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Handkerchiefed hems are usually just square, so that's what this is. They're easier to hem as well, usually, although I will still be hemming this with bias tape, which you will see why later, especially because it will show, so it's nice to have a really nice hem finish because the way this skirt hangs, and when you move around, you will see the hem finish, so you want it to be nice. But you can see how this starts to fall into the correct shape here if I fold my paper. So then, because I've added fullness to my A-line skirt front, and my A-line skirt front is not even that much smaller than my A-line skirt back pattern is normally, so if I'm making it any larger, it really should be able to work for the back as well. I think I'm going to use this piece for both the front and back of my skirt today. Here you can see my A-line skirt patterns on top of one another. The front is only just about like an inch slimmer than the back anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and use the same pattern piece for the front and back of my skirt on this dress today. The way I'm going to like accommodate for that is to just cut that piece out with a large amount of seam allowance. I'll show you that in just a moment. But here we're going to need the front of our skirt is going to look like this. So the front of the dress, one side we're going to have the pencil skirt, one side we're going to have the A-line skirt, and we need the kind of same like thing mirrored in the back. So I'm going to have the A-line skirt again on one side and the pencil skirt again on the other side. So I need you know, a left and a right skirts, and I have to make sure I'm not mixing those two up, because I don't want like two right sides of a skirt or two left sides of a skirt. I need one, like the pencil skirt to be on the left and the A-line skirt to be on the right. So this is easy to get turned around, especially with a fabric like mine where both sides of it look the same. But here you can see my pattern piece laid out on my fabric. Again, this is still cut on the straight grain like I normally like to, but I'm leaving myself about 2 inches of seam allowance along that center front of this piece, and that is because I'm going to use 1 inch of that seam allowance for the front piece, and then I'll use 1.5 inches or whatever for the back. So I'm just, the piece is essentially the same, and I can speak from, you know, from the future to let you know that that worked. Of course, I was just kind of trying it here. It could have failed, but I figured it would work out, and alas, the good news is it did. But of course, here above the blue table again, I'm going to transfer over all my information I need for my darts, because as usual, when it's me, whether I'm sewing mid-century things or Victorian things, I have a lot of darts to be sewing. Lots of darts to sew in my life. Anyway, I'm just marking those with colored pencil onto my back bodice pieces here, and then I'm connecting those with tailor's chalk here, and then I will pinch and pin those as usual and set these next to the machine. Again, I do like to sew my darts before I deal with my raw edges. Usually I will go ahead and take, after I sew the darts on these, I will go ahead and run them through my serger just to encase all the raw edges in thread. But because this bodice will be fully lined, I'm not going to bother serging it today. Now the front here, I did end up cutting this center front with a bit of seam allowance on it instead of cutting it on the fold, because the McQueen dress does have a center front seam, so I wanted to have a center front seam on my dress as well. So I just cut that pattern piece. When I cut it out, you can see I have a little bit of seam allowance along the front, and I just added that while I was cutting as opposed to changing the pattern piece, because, you know, I had already forgotten that point, and I just like, I'm not going to stop to add seam allowance to this pattern piece when I can just cut it, you know? You just have to be careful and remember that you're going to do that and not cut it out improperly. Which luckily for me, I had enough fabric so that if I had done that, I could have cut a new one, but, you know, risky business. But again, marking my darts, pinning my darts, setting things next to the machine to be sewn. Now I need to, of course, mark and sew my darts on my pencil skirt again. Again, be careful here. I mean, if you have a fabric that the inside and the outside don't look the same, this will be a lot easier. But for me, you know, normally you would cut out, if you're making a pencil skirt, you would cut out the front piece on a fold. Here I've cut it with 1 inch of seam allowance because I cut the other piece, the other skirt piece with 1 inch of seam allowance. The reason I cut this with 1 inch of seam allowance in the front, as opposed to 1/2 inch, which is what I normally use seam allowance wise, is because there will be a slit in the front and I want there to be enough seam allowance along that slit. And here you can see I'm actually tracing along the center front line so that I know where it is later when I'm sewing and can sew directly along. Because I think this is a tiny bit over 1 inch. It's like fudged. So I just want to make sure that that slit in the front has enough of like a turn back to be kind of covered there. So we'll get to that when we come to it. I'm also deciding how far I want that slit to go. So I've just kind of held this up to my body and was like, my knee's about here. So it went about knee level with that slit that I'll be putting in the front. And then again, tracing my darts up here at the waist so that I can pin them and sew them. Still have 4 darts to sew, 2 in the front and 2 in the back for the pencil skirt side of this. But luckily the A-line skirt does not have any darts. So one side of this skirt, we are mercifully free of having to sew any darts. Same sort of thing here for my back pencil skirt pattern. Again, the one side of my skirt is just a regular pencil skirt, and the other side is just a regular, you know, sewing wise, a regular A-line. We've added a little bit of fullness in there, but that doesn't make any difference in the order of operations when it comes to sewing things. So again, I will just mark my darts, mark them with tailor's chalk, and then be able to sew them. I'm sorry about the lighting in this video, by the way, because it's inconsistent and weird. My camera, normally when I'm shooting down here in the sewing room, I have it set to manual so I can control the lighting at each step of the way. And I didn't realize my camera was still set to automatic here. So the lighting is changing itself to try and accommodate for changing conditions, which, no, camera, you don't know what you're doing. So I'm sorry about that. I did not realize that this was set on automatic. Otherwise, I would not have these strange like lighting that is going back and forth. I don't know. I'm not into it. Here again are my sleeve pieces as well. This again is just my standard sleeve with an elbow dart, so I'm just marking that elbow dart so that I can sew that. And you can see here, this fabric is extremely lint-tastic, which will be continue to be a problem, and in the future, this dress will continue to be a problem, because for some reason this is just a lint magnet like nothing else. It's great. Love that for me. I will also just take my pattern pieces again here and of course cut them out of some lining fabric, in this case just some black muslin that I have here in the stash. I can take everything, now that all my darts are marked and pinned and sitting right here in the top of the screen, you can see on the blue table still. Above my machine, I can go ahead and start sewing all of my darts. As usual, just sewing from the top end of the dart off the end of the dart point. Especially when it comes to bodice darts, I do try and like curve off the edge just a tiny bit and really sew right close to the edge and then right off the edge. And then I tie my darts shut just because that's how I was taught in fashion school and it works for me. You must do what is right for you, of course. But here I've just sewn off the edge and I can tie this dart shut, and then I will sew all the rest of those mini darts in the exact same fashion. Again, you've seen me sew many a dart, almost as many as you've seen me manipulate around over on the pattern drafting section, you know. Sewing mid-century clothes. It's mostly, you know, it's a lot of darts, as I'm often saying. And of course, now that all my darts are sewn, I can go ahead and press them all. So over here on the ironing board, I'm going to start pressing all my darts. I'm pressing my shoulder darts here towards the center front, and my waist darts as well. The shoulder dart is quite large and could interact with the neckline while sewing the lining in later, so I will actually trim that, you'll see. I'm going to set those pieces aside for now. Again, the lighting is being such a pain. I'm so sorry about that. Did not notice that I was on automatic. But yes, these are all my darts are sewn, so I can press all of them. This one had a little bit of a wonkiness going on. But I will go ahead and serge just the bottom waist edge of all my bodice pieces because everything else is going to be encased in the lining, so I don't need to really worry about the raw edges here, but the waist I'm going to leave like open, so I will go ahead and serge the raw bottom like waist seam of this because I'm going to sew it to the skirt as one, the lining and the fashion fabric together as one, almost like as if it was flat lined when it comes to sewing the skirt on later. So I will go ahead and serge that. You can see here I'm just trimming that dart on both these pieces here, just so that that dart fullness does not get in the way. You can trim your darts to 1/2 inch if you want to. I just never really tend to bother unless they're going to get in the way like this. I went and grabbed my glass-headed fine pins here so I can, of course, sew over them without feeling guilty. That's right. But I'll go ahead and pin my center front together here. Again, you don't have to have a center front seam on something like this, but because the McQueen dress had it, I decided to continue that detail. It's nice when you have a skirt that has a center front seam to have a center front seam on the bodice as well. It just seems consistent that way for some reason. Just give this a quick little press here. Still lamenting how lint-tastic this fabric is. This is a cotton twill, by the way. I just had a bunch of this cotton twill in my stash, and so I decided to use it for this, almost like as a proof of concept to see if this pattern, to see if I was making sense of this pattern correctly. I've never tried to sew anything particularly like this with two very different skirt silhouettes in one dress. So I wanted to see if my theory about how that went together was correct. With a fabric that I wasn't feeling too precious about. This fabric I originally bought to interline my Victorian project, but of course it was too heavy of a weight for that, and I switched over to muslin. So I just have tons of this laying around here in the stash. And of course, a black twill is a very useful fabric for me in general, but this one, it just turns out, is too lint hungry. So I don't know if I will. I have a couple of yards of this left over, and I don't know if I'll use it to make any other clothes because it's just so linty. Unfortunately, it's also like quite crisp. It's like a medium to light weight for a twill. It's not too heavy of a weight. It's not like a denim or anything, but it's very crispy, and so it, I don't know, it looks kind of wrinkly once you make it into clothes. I don't know, it's not the ideal fabric, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But of course, in this pandemic panini world, as people have been saying, you know, just insert any word that starts with P. In this Pomeranian that we're still stuck in, oh no, that sounds awful. Yeah, panini. We're going back to panini. In this panini, I can't go and like feel and touch and buy fabric in person. So, or feel and touch anything. Oh no, I've got lost existentially again. So ending up with twill that's a weird weight. You know, it's bound to happen to a seamstress now and again when shopping online. But here I'm just pinning all my shoulder and side seams together while I ramble on into very strange places today. Oh well. And I will pin my underarm seam of my sleeve as well. I'm in a bit of a kooky headspace these days, lads. I need to take a break. But there's no time for such things, you know? There's no time. There's no time for a break. Although, I mean, I hope you're all doing well out there, because goodness. Not that the news has been, like, not that there's been great news recently, and I mean that like in geological time, but it's been extra bad this week as well, and good. I mean, keep yourselves safe, keep your neighbors safe. It's a mad, mad world out there. It's not great. I mean, like, sewing seems such like a simple and nice thing to be doing, honestly, because it's like, only so much can go wrong when you're sewing a dress as opposed to like trying to live. Anyway, here, lining up my side seams of my skirts as well. Like I said, I apologize. Everything is a little bit of a mess today. Please forgive me. But here's my side seam of my pencil skirt, and I just pinned the side seam of my A-line skirt as well. Eventually we will sew these two skirts, completely different skirts, together along the center front seam and the center back seam, so should be fun. But we'll get to that when we, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. For now, we can just use our regular half-inch seam allowance and sew those side seams on the skirts pieces, on the bodice pieces, and then sew the shoulder seams as well. Lots of things. Just, again, constantly pinning as much as I can on the ironing board, bringing everything over to the machine, sewing that like batch, bringing it back over to the ironing board, ironing everything, pinning the next round, switching back over to the sewing machine and sewing that round. I like to do everything in batches, as I always say. But I can sew the underarm seams for my sleeves as well. You could also hem your sleeves at this point if you wanted to. I don't do it till later, just because, I don't know, order of operations wise. You can do your sleeve hems last if you want to. It's not going to make a difference. I didn't choose to fully line my sleeves this time. I just have them. That's why I serged the edges of my sleeves and my skirt, but not the bodice, because the bodice will be lined, but everything else, the raw edges are serged so that they don't come unraveled when I throw this dress in the wash later. I am just, again, using my half-inch seam allowance for all this current round of sewing, and just using all-purpose Gutermann polyester thread on this, over here on the Singer 99K, as usual. And here I am trying to combat some of my lint problem again. Why is it so linty? I mean, it's the curse of loving black clothing anyway, being covered in lint, and in my case, cat hair all the time, because I have gray cats and black clothes. But, when some fabrics are extra, they're like Velcro for lint, and it's not cool. Just pressing my side seam on my skirt there, and then on the other skirt here, you can see this is the bottom of the side seam of the A-line side of the skirt, so it comes to this point here on the hem, and I think on the Alexander McQueen skirt they actually evened that point out, so they didn't have it coming to quite a point at the side seam. You can go ahead and just add in paper on both your front and back, well in my case, which is the same pattern piece, so on the pattern piece, to even out that area if you wanted it to have a subtle curve instead of come to a point there. But I can go ahead and lay my A-line skirt down with the fashion fabric side up, I suppose. Again, we can't tell the difference in this fabric, unfortunately. It makes both demonstrating and making this more difficult, unfortunately. But I'm laying my pencil skirt on top of that, and then I'm pinning those right sides together along the center front seam here, and I will sew down to where I want my slit to be and just do a little bit back stitching down there. And I have that larger seam allowance again so that I can turn that slit in or out. Go ahead and press my bodice a little bit here. Again, pressing my side seams open here and my shoulder seams as well. Just using the tailor's ham to do that to get in here. It's not a curved seam, but it'll work. And then down here at the end of the ironing board, I'm using the narrower bit of board in order to be able to have better leverage while pinning my neckline down here. So I'm just pinning the lining to the outside along the neckline, including along the V here, and I will sew, or bag my lining, I suppose, just along the neckline here. And then the rest of the time I'll be treating this lining almost as I've flatlined the rest of this. So I'm really only using the lining to facilitate the finishing of the neckline up here. But here back on the machine, I can go ahead and sew that center front seam between the skirts, or the two skirts together, I suppose, along the center. Just using regular stitch length to do that, 10 or 12 stitches per inch around then. I usually use around 12. It's kind of hard to set it exactly on this machine, so somewhere around there. Just sewing over my pins, unsurprisingly, and then I'll do some back stitching down here where the slit will begin. Set this aside for now. And then I can sew my bodices, my bodice to a bodice lining. I didn't sew all the way to the edge on these because I wasn't sure how I wanted to finish this lining along the back zipper, but I just ended up, again, treating it as if it was flat lined back there, so in the end it didn't matter. Here I'm being extra careful. You can see the lining does not have a center front seam because, again, there was no reason to add one. It was just another step other than for aesthetics. So I only did it on the outside, but I'm just making sure that I'm coming to the point of that V where it is sewn together on the outside. Oh man, I know I say this all the time, but I am not making sense today. It's possible I need a nap or a vacation, but don't we all, you know? Don't we all? Although my dad is getting his first dose of the vaccine today. He's the first one in my family, first one in my household to be vaccinated, and I'm so excited because he goes to work every day and therefore is like our most at-risk person in our household. And so he's getting his first dose today, and I'm very excited about that. And then soon, in a week here, my mom should be eligible because it's by, eligibility is by age here in Colorado, at least so far. So soon my mom will be eligible, and then the 2 people who leave the house the most will have been vaccinated, and that will make me feel about 50% better. And then eventually, when they start vaccinating millennials, I'll be able to at least have like a thrifting day out, and won't I be thrilled? Oh my gosh, I can't even tell you. But yeah, I just clipped my curves and clipped my V, and now I'm just doing some edge stitching on that neckline so I can press it all inside, the lining inside, and my neckline will be finished. And I can go ahead and press my center front seam on the skirts here, including that slit down here. So you can see why it's nice to have a little bit of extra seam allowance. Just helps this slit seem quite finished, you know? Especially when I'm not fully lining the skirt on this garment, but we will be talking about a skirt lining later, even though we haven't mentioned one so far. I didn't know I needed one. Turned out, in the end, maybe I did. And here I am just turning my lining to the inside along the neckline, giving that a quick press, pinning it while it's still warm to kind of cool in place, as I like to do. The way I get like a crisp V, a point to my V band there, by the way, is because I've clipped that on the inside. You gotta clip your curves and your V's close to the seam. It feels scary, but it will facilitate a nice smooth finish. I'm just going to go ahead and pin my lining and my fashion fabric together at the side seam and at the shoulder seam, and then I will go ahead and serge this raw edge, this like arm side edge, over on the serger. Now that I have my pieces sewn together and like lined, again, I'm treating them kind of as one, as if it was flat lined at this point. I thought I would actually just leave this little section in real time for you, so you can see how I smooth things and readjust things as I move this through the serger here. Just because, I don't know, speeding everything up sometimes makes it seem so easy, and it is, but I am being careful and patient and taking my time moving things through the machine, both on this machine and the other one, to make sure that I'm, you know, you can take as much time as you need to make sure things are done smoothly. Now, before I can set my sleeves into the arm size of my bodice, though, I need to go ahead and put in some gathering stitching along the top of my sleeve caps. Again, this is not because my sleeves will be gathered in the end. It's just because there is a bit of extra ease that is built into a sleeve cap when you're drafting the sleeve pattern to begin with. And that is just so that this little curved edge at the top of the sleeve cap can be a thing. So there's a little bit of extra ease built into a sleeve cap that you just need to gather up. And in the end, it will look smooth once the sleeve is set in. It just helps everything fit properly into place and like roll over the shoulder on the body later. So here I am just setting the sleeve again, right sides together. The sleeve is inside my bodice here so that I can set my sleeves in. I never end up doing this perfectly on camera. It's like my camera always cuts out, or I'm always like halfway off camera like this. So I apologize for that. Again, the camera is not doing a good job of being like, hey, I need a director, you know? I need an AD to be like, hey, move over a little bit. But there's no one down here to help me out with that kind of thing. It's like shooting a cooking show, but by yourself, which I'm sure people do, and like, good for them, honestly. All right, now I'm all pinned in here, and you can see it looks like it will be a little bit gathered, but right where this ½ inch in will not be gathered. Hopefully this makes sense. You've seen me set in sleeves before here. I know I do have a habit of using my all-in-one sleeve pattern all the dang time, so people don't get to see me set in sleeves often, but I promise it's not because I'm afraid of it. Something like this is no problem at all. The Victorian sleeves that I've been doing lately, that is a bit of a pain in the arse to put it Scottishly. You know, it's not as much fun. But again, you can see how I keep my hand inside the garment here. And actually I have a thread that's like stuck here that I had to slice because I'm like, why am I not moving? And there was like a weird thread that had got caught. It was preventing me from being able to move around here smoothly. Like, just move the project as, like, stop and start as much as you need to, and move the project however you need to, contort it, to be able to sew. The only thing that really needs to be smooth here is what's going right under the presser foot. So, like, whatever else you have to scrunch up to get it to be nice under there, do it, you know? It's a battle setting in a sleeve, so do whatever you have to do to win. And here is my finished sleeve all set in. So you can see there's no actual gathering along the seam in the end here, especially once I press this. This is before I press it. It's just that gathering stitching helps it have this nice curved edge over the shoulder. And lots of lint in this fabric. So here I have my skirt with its weird Frankenstein, 2 different sides. I guess it's more of a Jekyll and Hyde kind of a skirt than a Frankenstein skirt, if we're going to get monster specific. But I can go ahead and pin my bodice to my skirt now. Again, I'm just treating this, I actually have run I've pinned the waistline edge of the lining and the fashion fabric for the bodice together and run it through the serger again, just like I did for the arm side. So again, I just kind of treated it was like it was flatlined from there on. And so I'm just sewing the entire bodice waistline to the entire skirt waistline here. You could leave that area free and then push the seam allowance up into the main body of the garment and then like hide it by folding the lining down over it. I'm not sure if I've shown how to do that in any of my videos. Probably at some point. I don't use linings all the time, as we know, but I just decided to use it as like a flat lining, and I'll just press this seam open later. Everything's finished. It'll be fine. Again, this is almost kind of a wearable mock-up of this pattern because I wasn't sure. You know, I haven't made a muslin for this. I don't know if I'm going to like the style on me. I don't know if what I've tried with the patterning will work. So at this point, I'm not doing like the world's finest finishes for this. So if I end up liking this dress and I like this pattern, then maybe we'll make like a luxury version in the future. Again, this is kind of a knockoff dress today of this Alexander McQueen dress. Their version has like nice tailoring and shoulder pads built in. Their version's made out of a nice suiting wool with like a silk lining, I think the website states it has. So we could make a nice luxury version of this same dress in the future if you want. So let me know if that's something you would be interested in seeing. Or if you just want to see like the results of that, I could like show you. Because again, the process would be nearly identical to this, just with nicer fabrics and like any changes I might need to make to this pattern. But here I am just sewing my center back shut with a basting stitch length, as you've seen me do here before. And here I'm like, ooh, what is my actual seam allowance here? Let me just make sure I have where I need to be. I actually do have a sketched mark on the skirt. You just can't see it on camera. It's just so faint. But I just wanted to make sure I had the right seam allowance down here because my skirt seam allowance is so much larger than my bodice. Because, again, something I could even out in the patterning stage, but it will not, in the end, make a difference, so I never bother. But down to my double pins, I've just been basting, and then from the double pins down to the hem, I'm sewing with my regular stitch length. If you've seen me do zippers here on the channel before, you know what I'm talking about. Last week, I'll put a video up to the A-line skirt video from last week here in a card because I kind of go through my zipper in a more slow and measured way, so you can actually see exactly how I do my lapped zippers. But I'm doing it the same way as ever here on this dress. So here I've taken my basting stitching out now that I have pressed that back seam, but like this gives me a nice finished top opening for my zipper to go into. You'll see that in just a moment. Here I turn this right side out again. So now I have this folded back, perfectly aligned from basting it like that opening to set my zipper into here. And of course on the right hand side of my dress here, I'm just going to pin that folded edge right along the zipper teeth, and I will sew it right along the zipper teeth, and that will be facilitated by using a zipper foot to do this. So here's that all pinned in place, like so, just with pins parallel these days. I used to put them perpendicular, now I put them parallel. Doesn't make a difference, they have to come out anyway. But here I'm switching over to my zipper foot, like so, here on the machine. I can slide my dress on here, and then I'm just going to sew that side of the zipper right next to the zipper teeth, that folded edge, sewing that right down to the zipper tape underneath. Again, when I get to the end of this, you will see that I leave the needle down, put the presser foot up, and then move the zipper pull out of my way, put the presser foot back down, and then keep sewing on the rest of this, which is how I just get to that last little bit of the end up here at the neckline where the zipper pull will be in my way. Needle down, up, zipper pull back, back down, sew the last inch or so, like so. Now I can sew the other side here, and to do so I'm just going to kind of put a few guideline pins in here because I just want to make sure that I have my waistline, of course, matched up here. That's the most important thing here. But the rest of this, again, these pins are more like a guide than they are like a rule. So I'm just putting a couple of pins in here, some parallel, some perpendicular. What the heck am I doing this day? Who knows? Having a time. I'm thinking, man, this dress is going to be so linty anyway. It's going to be covered in lint all the time. Is this even worth finishing? Will this come out looking okay? You know, I hadn't done a muslin yet. And I never really make muslins or mock-ups, as we know. So I just kind of trust myself and hope for the best. And we'll see how it works out for me this time. Anyway, now that my zipper is in, which my camera, yes, did die while that was happening. So again, watch last week's A-line skirt video to see how I do the other side of my lap zipper. It's very... I do my zippers the same every time. But I'm just going to go ahead and pin my sleeve hems here. I'm just going to turn these up once at 5/8 instead of turning them twice. Just because, again, this fabric is kind of crispy and on the thicker-ish side. So I didn't want to have like a big, thick rolled of fabric at my sleeve hem. So I'm just turning it up 5/8. Just pressing that, and I will stitch this down with like a long and short stitch that I normally do for hemming in general. So I'm just going to like kind of secure it where the seam allowance is because I have a little bit of extra room to play with around there. And then I will just take like a 1 cm long stitch on the inside and a tiny stitch on the outside. And then you can see some hook and eyes sitting there. It's because I will sew a hook and eye to the back neckline of this dress as well, which later in the modeling footage, if you're looking very close, you will notice that I did not have that hook and eye closed. So that's a shame. So I look a little bit sloppily dressed in the end of this. Please forgive me once again. I ask for a lot of forgiveness this video. Don't know what that's about. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and hem this dress. And how am I going to do that? With bias tape, because it's me, you know, once again. I'm a very predictable creature, you know, here in the sewing room. So here I have, actually, again, more of the black muslin that I used to line the bodice of this dress. I have cut that at a 45-degree angle in 2-inch wide strips, sewn those strips together to create bias tape. Again, you can buy prepackaged bias tape as well, but you also can just make it anytime. If you can't access bias tape, that makes no sense to me, because if you can access any fabric, you have access to bias tape because you just cut it yourself. Especially if you're using like a mid to lightweight cotton, like anything up to like a, I don't know, a like quilting weight cotton, you can just cut bias out of the same fabric you used to make the rest of the dress. And just the hem be the same, the hem facing be the same. It would match perfectly then, of course. So I'm just using bias, and I'm going to hem one side of the skirt up to the pointed end of the side seam on the A-line. So where that A-line skirt side seam, see how I'm just hemming this short section here up to that angle, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it on the inside like this, finish everything off. That's at the front of the slit there, but I'm just turning this to the inside, and I will go ahead and sew that hem down, and then I will sew the bias tape onto the other side, and then turn it and sew that side down. And that's just because where that angle, you'll see in a second, where the two pieces of bias tape for the hem come together at the side seam on the A-line side of the skirt, you kind of just have to finagle them together on the inside, and it's easier if one side's finished and then you just finish the other side on top of it. You'll see again what I mean in a second. This is how I did the corners on the square parts of this hem, by the way. Just like this. This is why I like using bias tape, because you can go around a curve, you can go around a corner nice like this. Bias for hemming. It's like one of my soapbox things. My two like biggest, I feel like, things I try and impart on my channel. 1, you should try pattern drafting. It's actually easier than you think it is. Jump in, dive in. 2, hem everything with bias. These are like my 2 campaign messages. I don't know why. But here I am, again, long stitch up into the folded edge of the bias, tiny stitch into the fabric, so on the outside, all you can see are tiny, tiny stitches, and you can barely see those, especially in like a printed fabric. But here is where the side seam of the A-line skirt comes together. So again, we have that weird shape up here. So it was easier to finish one side and finish the other. And then I decided to add in a little weight here to hold this part of the hem down, except for I didn't have any weights. Sometimes people will use like a washer or something, or like a heavy button. I didn't have any of those things, but what I did have was a quarter. So this dress is officially worth 25 cents now because I've sewn a quarter into the side seam down here. And that's just because this side of the skirt wants to flare out a bunch more than the pencil side does. So I added this little weight in here. And you can see on the McQueen dress, I think they have a little weight sewn to the seam on theirs as well. You can see right behind her leg, there's like some sort of like a covered round thing. I think that's a little weight to weigh down that side of the skirt, which of course their fabric is a lot flowier and better suited to this design than mine is, but that's okay. You can see that there's skirt in there. It's not lined on this side, which will come into importance in just a moment, because they didn't have a skirt lining, and that's why I didn't use a skirt lining, but it turned out that I needed half of a skirt lining. Because after I sewed this quarter into my hem, I went ahead and tried this dress on, and this skirt did not hang perfectly. And the reason for that is because on the A-line skirt side is a lot of flare, and on the pencil skirt side it's supposed to fit close to the body. But because the A-line allows the skirt to move around so much, the pencil skirt does not lay perfectly straight along the body. Now, one way to fix this is to insert a lining that is the same size as the pencil skirt to the other side underneath the A-line skirt. So here's our secret pencil skirt we're about to insert onto the free flowing side of this dress. So I've just cut this little muslin version of my pencil skirt using the same exact pencil skirt that I used, like my same pencil skirt pattern that I always use, and used for the pencil side of this skirt. And we're going to insert that in here on the full A-line skirt side. After the fact, you know, had I known that I needed this lining, I would have done it from the start. But here we are, you know, here we are. So I'm sewing this back of the pencil skirt lining to my zipper here. I'm just going to pin this all along my center back seam, including the zipper opening, and I will actually be hand sewing, just felling this little lining down and tacking it into the inside of my dress, especially because I didn't again know if this was going to work or solve my problem. The dress was actually, I would say it was like 80% fine without this little lining, but I just knew that the pencil skirt could hang straighter if I inserted this lining in here. So basically, almost what you want to do for this is create the regular just pencil skirt dress and then have the A-line skirt on top of that, which is kind of what this is doing without having to have the full pencil skirt in here. It's just, again, that black muslin. Hopefully you can tell what I'm doing here and it makes sense. Again, had I known I was going to need this from the start of this project, it would have been a lot easier, but it's being added in here as an afterthought, unfortunately. But it does mean that this skirt hangs a little bit better in the end. Again, it's still not 100% perfect because this fabric, honestly, is just too thick for this project. But, you know, not every single project I show you can be flawless, I suppose. Or I would rather show you this project that I'm not 100% happy with, I guess is what I want to say. Because even I, after sewing for 10 bajillion years, I still, you know, think, oh, maybe that'll work. And sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't. So here is my lining sewn in. Again, same exact pattern. I just serged this little lining to hem it. No one will really ever see this. So I have a pencil skirt on one side, an A-line skirt on the other, but the A-line skirt side now has a pencil skirt lining in it. So the A-line skirt will still hang free on the outside, but it will be drawn close to my body on the inside with this lining. And here is my finished Alexander McQueen dress, or at least a wearable mock-up of this design. There are probably a few little things I would change. I'm not sure if I would keep this skirt this long, and of course this fabric is a little bit stiff for this design just because while it's good for a more structured dress like a pencil skirted dress, it's not the best for something more flowy, and this skirt kind of has both. So it's not exactly the best fabric for this. Of course the Alexander McQueen dress, the original one, is made out of some sort of a suiting wool, which has probably got more of a drape to it. It's probably the same weight as this twill that I used today. It's not like a super lightweight silk or something like that, but it does have more of a drape to it. The wool has a more of a silky drape to it, so that works better for the A-line skirt side, or the A-line plus skirt side. In any case, this will be a very wearable mock-up for me, at least, a very wearable dress in my wardrobe, because of course it is black, like most of my wardrobe is these days. But you know, I really like styling black, and it matches almost any accent color, you know? I hope despite the more modern inspiration today that you still enjoyed this project. And of course, I'll be back with more sewing here real soon. See you then. Bye.